Hey there, everybody. It's Kevin and my good best buddy Steve from Denver. How are you, buddy?
I am doing wonderful, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Good to have you all with us. Good to have you here, Kevin, and spend time with you. What do we
Yeah.
got?
Well, we're going to talk about food, and specifically, it's an issue that speaks to the shift. It speaks to us individually, and it speaks kind of collectively for the human race right now. It's a pretty big issue. It's kind of meaty, uh, and yeah, and so
And
we're
then,
gonna, yeah, that's a bad joke. And so what I thought I'd do, Steve, is start off by asking you your opinions on a couple of different issues that have arisen recently with regard to food. And the first one has to do with the idea of veganism and vegetarianism, because I know that both of us are meat eaters, but I kind of wanted to get your view on how you see vegetarianism and veganism playing a part in people's lives today, and how you think it might be associated with the shift. What do you think about that?
my thinking is that it's a personal choice. I think that ideally, and in my case, it can be a non-choice or a choice based on what you feel your body asks for. But there are also other aspects, other parts that play into the decision making.
Like
So, for
what?
well, some people don't like the idea that animals have to die for them to be nourished, and I can relate to that because I feel the same way. Um, I don't allow that to prevent me or prohibit me from eating meat. I feel like it's part of the natural process, and that's part of the reason that the animals are here is to provide us with that nutritional value. But I can understand why some people would be averse to that, and I honor that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see how people would think that if we're one with each person in the world, we're also possibly one with all the animals as well. And you wouldn't eat a human, and so why would you consider eating an animal then if we all consider life in general to be sacred? And so I agree with you that I can see that point of view. As I said, I eat meat as well. I'm a mental vegetarian though, because I believe my hamburgers grow on trees and my chickens are things plucked out of the ground. And I don't think that I could do any sort of butchering, and certainly not. I Hunting is just beyond uh, my understanding of what I'm capable of doing. And in fact, a number of years ago, I stopped fishing because I felt that it was hurting the worm and it was not helpful to the fish because I wasn't eating it. I was just throwing it back in, and I felt that it was not appropriate for me. So that's sort of the way that I look at it. But I also believe that meat is an important part of my diet. I could probably become a vegetarian, but I don't want to, not at this stage anyway. Although I am trying to eat more plant-based foods. But I'm doing that more from a health standpoint than trying to save the animals situation. But Steve, there's another aspect to that too, and that is how livestock are treated, and it actually feeds a little bit into big farming. I guess that's a good way to put it, where uh, companies such as Monsanto are taking over the smaller farms. And how does that play into organic foods and free range foods? Do you have a feel as to whether those things are important issues for you or for other people? Organic and free range.
Well, and GMOs is a big thing.
Oh, very big.
Yeah, and for me personally, it's not an issue. Now I do go for the free range eggs or cage free because I at least have the illusion, as it may be, that these animals are being treated better. If they actually are, I don't know that. So I have some consideration in what I do for the well-being of the beings that I am ultimately ingesting. The health perspective of it is something that I don't particularly pay mind to. So are the GMOs unhealthy for me? Are the free range beef and eggs and whatnot healthier? Is being a vegetarian or vegan healthier than my diet, which includes meat? It may or may not be. I don't struggle with trying to answer that question. It's just not an issue for me, but I know it is for others, and they follow their conscience and their heart and what their body asks for, and I honor that.
You know, Steve, all these issues, including gluten, a lot of people have gluten issues, peanut allergies, allergies to different food, lactose intolerance, and things like that. Those issues have come forward more so, I feel like, in the last 5 to 10 years than they ever have. And I think part of it is that over the years, we had stopped be concerned with what we put in our mouths. We were just eating, and eating was not something that you gave much mind to. And I think that led to sort of a detrimental effect on our bodies. And our bodies, Steve, to me, and I think you agree with this as well, are the vehicles that kind of house our souls and our spirits that allow us to have this earthly experience. And so if we don't take care of our bodies, we have a shortened lifespan potentially, or one filled with more hardship due to the breakdown of our body that keeps us from being able to follow our spiritual paths. And so perhaps that's one reason why all these issues have come to light recently, is to make us more aware of the things that we are putting into our mouths and how we're feeding this vehicle that houses our souls. Maybe?
Agreed. And I think that you and I, whereas we would have been common among the mainstream at one point in time, are almost the exception now, in the fact that we don't face any challenges in terms of ill effects from eating certain kinds of food. I mean, I can eat anything. There's nothing that could be on my menu that my body would say, that's going to make me feel bad.
Yeah. But I also feel that we are fairly in tune, you especially, Steve, but we're fairly in tune with our bodies. And if there were something that didn't resonate with us, either we would know in advance and not eat it in the first place, or whatever feedback we were getting from that yucky thing would be enough to say, I'm not going to eat that again. I just went through a diet called Whole30, where essentially you're withdrawing all these different things like sugars and lactose and gluten and alcohol, just all these things from your diet, and then slowly adding them back in again and seeing how your body reacts to the reintroduction of those things. And I thought I was going to find a number of things that didn't agree with me through that process. And what it turned out to be was that nothing really bothered me. I was like you, very lucky that I can eat anything, which is sort of bad because sometimes I do eat everything, and I probably shouldn't eat everything. Cooking is a vehicle for me to share my love with people. I feel that I can introduce an energy aspect into the things that I cook, and I think you can feel that sometimes, Steve, in the things that I cook for you when we're up in the cabin, can't you? Is that almost a tangible aspect of the food that I make?
Well, it's all mixed together, Kevin, with the love that we share when you come up there, and it's hard to separate it out. It's just all part of the big picture, and the food that you produce for the two of us is made with love and enjoyed with love. And but that's all part of a big love fest that we have when you come up anyway. So it's hard to separate it out.
But interestingly, food is a form of energy for our bodies, and my belief is that someone who's preparing that food can actually inject their aspect into the food itself. And so that's something that I feel strongly about with food, that if someone's making a meal for me and is essentially not in a good frame of mind, that food doesn't taste as good as it does if that person is consciously thinking about preparing this particular dish with joy and with love. And so that's just that's a cook's perspective on things. I know you don't make a lot of things necessarily yourself, but I would urge you, as well as everybody else, that if you can kind of be in that mindset as you're preparing any kind of food, even a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that sandwich can actually be infused with your aspect and your energy. And if you have that love and joy in terms of in the preparation process, that'll actually become part of the meal itself, and that becomes ingested and part of the person that's actually partaking in that food. Yeah. So, Steve, obviously addictions can happen sometimes, and things can spin out of control in terms of the things that we eat and how much we diet. I mean, how much we don't eat even sometimes. And you're one of the lucky ones that seems to have a really good handle on what you can eat and kind of stay away from anything that's necessarily addictive. In fact, I don't really even know anything that you're addicted to food wise. Are you food or drink wise? Is there, do you have to have coffee in the morning, or could you do without it for a week?
Yeah, I'd be fine without it. I mean, I got, you could say I'm addicted to the extent that I like it. And if I didn't have it, it was like, I wish I had a cup of coffee. But a lot of times I won't even have a cup of coffee. And there are times when I'll drink a cup of coffee out of habit. And it's like, my body really didn't want this. I'm just drinking it out of habit.
Wow, Steve, you're so connected to your body. That's just so great. I wish I could be like that all the time, and I wish everyone else could be as well, because I think people would be in a much healthier state of being if they could do that. I find myself addicted to coffee. If I stop drinking it, if I don't have it almost on a daily basis, I get flu-like symptoms, which is not good. I noticed that when I was on this Whole30 diet, the first 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days even, the withdrawal from sugar, I think, and carbs for the most part. Although I was eating fruit, so I did have a carb source in doing this. But I was, again, this flu-like, really feeling bad for a while, and it just shows me that I do have these potential addictions. I think my parents were alcoholics, and I worry a little bit sometimes that my love of bourbon, which, thank you very much, that might be a little bit of addictive personality coming out. But I'm really happy to hear that you don't really have many of those. So good for you for that. I have to tip my cap to you on that.
Okay, yeah, it's a blessing. It's something to work at. I'm blessed with.
Yes. Steve, have you ever taken vitamins in your life, or have you ever taken supplements for things on a regular basis?
Not even on an irregular basis. I mean, I think when I was a kid, my mom
Flintstone vitamins.
Yeah, and as my kids grew up, my wife would get the kids these gummy vitamins, and I'd eat some of those because they tasted good. But that's the only reason.
Wow. Well, it's such a huge industry, and of course the makers of those vitamins and supplements will tell you that you're not going to be healthy unless you take these things. But just about everything else, everything you read from the medical field tells you that most people don't need these things in order to lead a healthy life or to have a healthy diet. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and what I've heard is that they can be useful at times when you happen to be a specific deficiency, for one reason or another. You happen to be deficient. Maybe your diet has been out of balance for some reason for a while, and it helps temporarily to have these to bring you back into balance. But it's not necessary or even helpful to be doing it on a day-to-day basis as part of your normal day-to-day food intake.
And I think you ought to be a little cautious, Steve, in saying that it's not right for you, because there could be situations where it may be right for somebody else in the way that they with their eating habits or things like that. But it's interesting because your diet is somewhat shitty sometimes as I look at it, and mine is as well. But I would also say that we're both pretty healthy people, and so while some people might say fast food is really horrible, Steve, and you're doing your body a disservice by eating it, you would disagree with that completely by saying, because that's a somewhat good part of your particular diet. And I would say the same for me. If you're listening to your body as far as what it's asking for, and you're providing those things that it's asking for, you're usually not going to go wrong with it. It's typically when your taste buds or your mind override what your body wants that you get into trouble. Would you agree?
Right. But so when people take vitamins, pills, are they doing that because their body's telling them that they need it, or are they doing it because their mind tells them they need it?
Well, I think it's important to discern between those two things. But if their body's asking for it, then you can't say necessarily it's wrong. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't mean to preclude that it could be a good thing for people to do. My feeling though is that if you're listening to your body and you're abiding by what it's asking you to eat, you're going to have a fairly healthy intake just from the food you eat, and you more than likely will not need a regular input of pills, of supplements of some kind. Now, again, people have various dietary needs that I don't have, and I think that could be a unique situation. So I'm not placing any judgment. My hope is that for people, once they really find the balance in the food that they eat in a healthy way, that they wouldn't need the vitamins. But again, everyone is unique.
Yeah, agreed. I was just being devil's advocate, Steve, because I'm actually in line completely with what you're saying. So I just wanted to kind of turn the tables a little bit and look at the other perspective, because I do know that a lot of people swear by the vitamins that they take or the supplements that they take. I have taken supplements from time to time. I'm not a pill taker, so it's hard for me to stay up on that after I give it a week or so, and if I don't see any immediate result, I stop taking those things, because I do agree with you, Steve, that most of our nutrition and the things that we need for health do come from our diet, and as long as you listen to what your body's asking for, you're going to get those things that it needs, because it's telling you that. One last thing, Steve, I just want to bring up too is that I've read this before in other places, and I just find it fascinating. The idea that some people could theoretically live simply by just breathing, breatharians, as they're called. And I love food so much that it's just so hard for me to even imagine that. Have you come across any channelings or anything that you've read that talks about the existence of these types of people that really don't need any food in order to survive as humans?
Yeah, I've heard about them existing. I've heard about some people who've written about living a breatharian life. There was one woman, I can't remember her name, that it seemed that she went a number of years just drinking water. I think she drank water, or it could have been a year. Anyway, it was a surprisingly long period of time. And she wanted to be able to show people that this was possible. And so she allowed film crews to come in and film her and to
Wow.
basically put the camera lens on her life so they could see that this is possible. And once
Wow.
they did that, she ended up, her health deteriorated and she could no longer sustain it. And it's because she felt like there was this prying kind of disproving attempt for people to say that this is not possible. And it was that negative energy that kept her from having this free flowing allowance of the prana through her body. Now, that was
Wow.
just an example that I read. I've heard of some yogis in the past going long periods of time without eating. I think it takes a very high state of consciousness to be able to do that. And I think it is possible under very rare circumstances to go long periods of time, whether that means, for the entire life or remainder of your life. I don't know if that has ever happened, but I think it's possible to pull the life force energy out of the air, and that's called prana, that life force energy, and make use of it to sustain you. Whether or not you can make that enough to sustain you entirely by itself is not an easy thing and not a common thing.
Man, I just, I have tried fasting before, and after 24 hours, I'm knee deep in Twinkies and ho-hos and just absolutely going crazy. So it's hard for me to even understand how someone could go even a week by just taking the energy out of the air. But it's very cool to consider, because I think that's part of the message of the shift, is that our reality isn't necessarily what we think it to be, and all the decades that we've lived under certain paradigms are going to be shattered in the next few decades, and this could easily be one of them. I'm going to certainly miss my kettle chips and and my bourbon, but maybe that's the way we're headed. But it's just kind of interesting to think about, and certainly something. It was actually in the news. I saw it as a news item in my my news feed on the internet the other day. Somebody who was a breatharian, and unfortunately I didn't get a chance to open it up and read it. But the fact that it was showing up in mainstream news was just amazing. And so we're seeing more and more of that, type of thing becoming mainstream. Just the discussion of topics like that. Well, Steve, that's about it. I just wanted to hit on some of these food topics that we're going to ultimately discuss in a meetup. But I also wanted our Facebook friends to understand kind of our perspective on food, and to kind of decide if they want to chime in themselves on their perspective on food, because everybody's got one. We didn't even talk really about diseases associated with food in terms of like bulimia and anorexia and sort of the psychology of food. That's a completely other subject that we could dive into. But food's an important thing for a lot of people, and I'd be interested in hearing other people's comments on that.
For sure. Yeah, I would like to hear from vegetarians, for instance. Again, because I'm not a vegetarian doesn't mean I don't honor people who are, or people who are vegan and they have their own reasons. And it'd be interesting to hear what those reasons and what their thinking is, and what they go through, and what their body experiences regarding all that. Be great to hear. I like the whole gamut of it, not just what I do with my own body.
Yeah. So let's start some discussion on that, because I think it could be very enlightening to you and me as omnivores, and we love different perspectives. So please share yours, and we'll never hesitate to share ours. Will we, Steve?
And we'll do it occasionally.
All right, buddy. Well, listen, you take care. I love you. I love everybody out there, and we'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.
Yep. Love you guys all. We'll see you later. Bye.